You were recorded. Okay, so welcome. My name is Jessica Castaneda. I get the pleasure of working with IDRC and the states that we have, and I also have Cari. You want to introduce yourself?
You bet. My name is Cari Semivan with Meta Associates, and I am the evaluator for IDRC.
So she is the one that I go to whenever I have questions on, okay, well, how are we supposed to evaluate this, or how are we supposed to make sure? So she keeps me on track and really has a good wrap around all of these different components. And so we kind of were, over time, we've had a lot of projects that we've worked with and a lot of recruiters that we have a work group right now that is specifically working on data reconciliation. And we have some data staff in it. And then we also have some IDNR, full-time IDNR staff. And one of them reached out one time and said, hey, could you explain what CSPR is and how all these things kind of really go together? And I just really would like to understand because I get bits and pieces. And because of that conversation, Cari and I, and looking at the topics that we're covering in this institute, we really wanted to look at what's a good foundation, a good base for things that you could know that would help you throughout the summer, help you with recruitment in general, and also get a really good picture of all these different components of MEP. So we're hoping we're kind of coming from the side of if you're a recruiter and maybe you don't have the background of all of these things. If you already have the background of this and you already are, you're on your CSP, you're on your SDP team and you're on your needs assessment, you might want to go to another session. But if not, or it may just help solidify all of those things together. So my background, I worked for a long time in Tennessee. And sometimes I would inherit projects. And so I inherited the CSPR when it was all wrong one year. And so I very much learned what the CSPR was. And I inherited the CNA when it was, oh, you're supposed to have a CNA and an SDP. And I didn't get a good comprehension of an understanding of how it all worked together, except for being thrown into it. And so over the years, my experience has probably come from the wrong side of it, of trying to fix it when it wasn't right. And Cari comes from the side of helping states really organize that and kind of set that out and get that organized. And I'm sure she's gone from the behind too to fix things a lot of times. So from that experience, we're going to kind of try to make sure that it makes all of this really does make sense. So we know, all of us know that it's our responsibility. We get the funds and then we're supposed to find, which of course is, a lot of people that are attending this institute are recruiters. And then you're supposed to serve. And so we really believe, like it says here, if done right, this funding can be well used and can be targeted to address specific students' needs. So it shouldn't be a haphazard, project where you're just, maybe this or maybe this. And then the opposite still happens. I mean, right now in this country, in our program, we serve a very, like 25% of our kids, which is, less than half of our kids are getting services from the migrant program. And so if we can improve this, hopefully that is all of our quests. We want to make sure that the services they get can be as high quality as possible. So to kind of put all these pieces together, there's a lot of data that's used to really facilitate how we should use those funds. There's a lot of things that go into play to make sure that we're kind of looking at what we have. And so all of us, most people have access to MSIX. If you don't have access, maybe you're brand new and you're not sure what MSIX is, there is a training that's going on, I think the next session, that is specifically from those that are creators of MSIX that will be there answering questions. But we realized that the national database, we can have records transfers, we can have notifications of moves. There's a lot of tools that you can use to assist IDNR. And I believe they're going to be going into some of those this afternoon or this next session. And we really believe that all recruiters should have access to this tool. So if we're looking at the components of the data, this is definitely one important side to make sure that everybody has access to. So when I was working with several of the staff, they kind of asked for how it all worked together. They had heard of MSIX, they worked on move notifications, but hadn't really looked at the reports. So I just have, some slides here of the kind of reports that are available. Your child mobility reports, your counts, your enrollments. Maybe you helped enroll some kids from a summer program and then that they went to the summer program and then you come out and see that for some reason they're not being counted. And so you can actually go and look at MSIX of what information is missing. So there's all of these different reports that are kind of going on. Maybe you have a student that the mom is reaching out to you and saying, hey, the student's really having a hard time, and you can go in and look up that student information and see if you have any of the course history or grade retention information that would be helpful to look at their past history and then be able to talk better with the school district. So there's a lot of different ways that recruiters can use MSIX. And sometimes we're just familiar with move notifications, and there's a lot more that needs to go in. So I would encourage you, if you're new to MSIX and you really don't see the alignment between MSIX and recruiting, to attend that session, the next session that's going specifically about that. So specifically, for sure, you want to be able to look at those missed moves, look at students lists, look at any kids that are excluded. So all recruiters should understand kind of how this works. You can see this thing, the report that says count reconciliation, helps you identify data quality issues. If you're not a data person, you may think, well, I don't really know, but I can tell you from personal experience, summer programs, you want to make sure that your kids are being counted in the summer, and you helped get those kids enrolled. And you take a look at this reconciliation report and you see that maybe 5 of them are not, they're missing something. So it's kind of helpful. Your student mobility, check out where people are coming and going. These are just 2 reports that you for sure want to have access to as recruiters to really kind of see what's going on there. Then we move into the needs assessment, and Cari's going to go in depth of really what that looks like, but I'm just kind of giving the quick overview of kind of how these pieces work together. States are required to determine what their kids need. You and I as recruiters may go out and mom says, hey, they really need to learn English. And you may not even be aware that that child is really struggling in reading, really struggling in, in several different areas that are not apparent right then. And so, but the program can't just go on our initial impression. We've got to look thoroughly at what their needs are. So students' academic needs are looked at, as well as social and emotional needs. So we've got to look at that whole child. And in this process, states are really, it's called comprehensive needs assessment, not just, quick needs assessment. It's really supposed to be a really comprehensive process to find out those needs. Once the needs are determined, a plan has to be in place. So you hear this lingo, we're having our needs assessment meeting. Okay, needs are to figure out what exactly the kids need. You're assessing what their specific needs, comparing it to other populations, and then you're supposed to do something about that. So sometimes I'll ask recruiter, like, well, what are the services that you provide in your area? Well, I know we do some tutoring and I know we do this, but you may not be totally honed in on everything that's being provided. It is, all states should be working on some sort of this process, whether they're doing the needs assessment or the service delivery, depending on the years. But all of them should have something that you can actually read if they're willing to share that. It says once needs are determined, a plan has to be put in place to meet those needs, to target those needs. I can't just say that my 4th graders are not reading on target level and then just say, well, but we don't really have a way to help them with that. We're going to focus instead on just giving, food services. So we've got, maybe I can still help with food, but I've got to really be able to show whatever I'm doing hopefully goes back to a need that we've determined. Then the state's SDP, so if you hear that lingo, or their service delivery plan, should clearly outline how migrant student needs will be met. And then not just saying we're going to meet this, but actually kind of looking at what kind of services are going to be designed and exactly how they're going to be implemented. So it's this, like the circle. Cari will show you a little bit. There's a circle that goes around. First the needs, then we're going to design these services. Now, at some point, we may have to say, hey, we had these grand ideas and it didn't work exactly how we thought it was going to happen. But it's on a rolling cycle. States evaluate their service delivery plan related to what they said they were going to do. They determine the progress. They see what's happening. Is this making the impacts? And then they adjust and improve based on the evaluation results. So it's a really, really helpful process. And like it says here, this should be a continuous improvement cycle. So these are lingo that you may think, I'm not sure what they're talking about. But the idea is, are we doing a better job at finding, recruiting, and serving migratory families? Or are we stuck in the rut? We're doing the same kind of thing because it's worked in the past and we haven't kind of looked at it. And then you have this report that's filled in. And so on the federal side, they're trying to see, okay, what do the numbers look like? What are we doing? I can say, they can come to my state and I can say, we do an excellent job. I just know that, we do everything we're supposed to and everybody's really happy. But then you look at my CSPR data and it says, okay, you signed up 4,000 kids and you only served 900. there's a story there. What did I do? When did we serve them? When are these kids coming and going? And so this CSPR paints the picture data-wise to show who was served, demographics of the population, and to give those that are funding an idea of what we're doing with those funds, what kind of services were provided, who provided those services. So this is the report that comes in yearly to the federal office so they can understand kind of what states are doing with the funding. So this is not all that the CSPR includes, but it does have some things that might be helpful or might be good for you to know. It has the total number of students, the ages that were served during the summer, ages that the students that were served, not just ages, the students that were served in summer, students that were served during the performance period. And then it breaks down into these different types of services, you know, who got math, who got reading, who got credit accrual, those that are receiving support services, those that are priority for service. So this is kind of an interesting snapshot that you can see those numbers and, you know, students with the QAD within the last 12 months. So who's coming and going, how much of your population is brand new in this last year. It really all goes back to this data that we're keeping, and you can kind of see how these things all go together. So for me, it was really interesting to look and say, okay, when I was working on CSPR, to be able to see, well, why don't we have as many kids moving in their QAD? Why is it 2 year? What's happening? Okay, we're serving so many kids. Why am I only serving my K through 8 kids? What could we do better for our high school kids? So it's an accounting also kind of tied to that service delivery, tied to the needs assessment. We said this was our needs. We said this is what we're going to do. Our numbers show on the CSPR what we were actually able to do in some of these areas. So I'm going to turn it over to Cari.
And Jessica, before you move on, can you go back to the other slide?
Sure can.
The previous one.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to point out on this slide is the category 1 count and the category 2 count, those first 2 bullets. Those are that's how the feds determine each state's allocation. So those are really key pieces of the CSPR. Okay, so if you stop sharing, okay, there we go. Before we get going, I want to do a little survey. So if you can go to menti.com and type in the code that is there, 6566-4401, or you can put your camera right up to the your computer screen and grab that QR code. So you should be accessing a survey. And if I'm going to go to the survey here in a minute, if you can't get onto menti.com, no worries, you can put it in the chat box, your response. Has everybody had a chance to get the code and the QR code? Okay, so I'm going to go to, there we go. Whoops, I need to share. Okay, can everybody see the survey? Oh, I see 3 people are going to do the presentation for me. Yay! I bet you that's Kim, Carlos, Alejandro. So the first one is, what is this continuous improvement cycle? What are you talking about? The second one is, I've heard the term, but I don't really know what it is. The third one is, I am familiar and have been involved in some of the processes. And the fourth one is, move over, Cari, let me do this session. I love it. So it looks like most of the people are not familiar with the continuous improvement cycle. And Jessica really started, she kind of gave an overview of this. So I'm going to start with providing you all with some information. And I just want to start, first of all, with some acronyms. And Jessica went over some of these. CNA is Comprehensive Needs Assessment. CSPR is the Consolidated State Performance Report. GEPRA is the Government Performance and Reporting Act. MPO is Measurable Program Outcomes. NAC is the Needs Assessment Committee. That is the group of stakeholders in the states that work on the comprehensive needs assessment. Out-of-school youth, you all know this one. PFS, Priority for Services, and SDP is Service Delivery Plan. So what are we talking about? What is the continuous improvement cycle? So this graphic that you see here was included in OME's toolkits for CNA and SDP. And there's also an evaluation toolkit, and all of these toolkits can be found on the results website. But the evaluation toolkit was, all three were developed in 2012. The CNA and SDP toolkits were updated in 2018, and this is the new graphic that was included in those toolkits. So the continuous improvement cycle is cyclical. So every 2 to 3 years, each states are asked to look at their needs, conduct a comprehensive needs assessment. This is the first part of the cycle. So the CNA informs and guides all aspects of MEP planning and identified needs. It clearly identifies and determines migratory student needs. That's the main goal of the CNA. Then we move on to the service delivery plan, the next part. Once you do a CNA, then the states are required to update their service delivery plan or create one if they don't have one. This plan defines statewide services. A key component of this SDP is the strategies in the service delivery plan. Strategies are what the MEP is going to do statewide to provide services to migratory students, parents, families, and staff. Then the third component after you've implemented the service delivery plan is evaluation. And that is to determine if MEP services have met their mark. So the way we do this is during the service delivery plan, the SDP committee creates measurable program outcomes that are the objectives for the MEP. So these are really specifically tied to the services that are provided through the MEP. Okay, so why do we do this? Well, it's required. So this lists the statute, the regulations, and the non-regulatory guidance for CNAs, SDPs, and evaluations. So that you can see, if you want to look things up, I know it's very exciting reading, but it is required of all state MEPs to do this process. So OME requirements for state MEPs is that they update the needs assessment every 2 to 3 years, or if there's been some major changes in the needs of students. Also, they need to update the service delivery plan after each CNA has been conducted, and then conduct an annual performance results evaluation. So let's look a little bit deeper at the CNA. So this assessment of needs is the first step in planning the MEP. So everything else is built upon the CNA. So we all know in the real world, there's really never enough money to meet all migratory student needs. We have to define what are the priority needs. And that's what the CNA does. So some of the needs assessment data that is collected and that the Needs Assessment Committee reviews to determine migratory student needs, they look at CSPR data, such as services, demographics. They also look at evaluation data, so progress of migratory students on state assessment results, graduation and dropout rates for migratory students and non-migratory students to determine the differences and the gaps. And then most importantly, progress toward the MPOs. How are migratory students, teachers, families doing, making progress towards those MPOs for that state? In addition, when we at Meta facilitate a comprehensive needs assessment in the state, we conduct needs assessment surveys of parents, students, OSY, and MEP staff. And these surveys look at what instructional services are needed, what support services are needed for parents, what types of support do they need to improve their skills or be able to better support their children. And then also on staff, their opinions of what students' needs are and what parent needs are. So the SDP is then developed based on the comprehensive needs assessment. This document spells out the services that the state MEP will provide to address the unique educational needs of migratory students. The key components of the SDP, like I mentioned before, are the strategies and the MPOs. So strategies are the services that the projects will implement to achieve their program outcomes. Here are some sample strategies from a couple of states that we work with. So you want to coordinate. Then if there are no other programs providing those services, then you provide the evidence-based supplemental targeted ELA and math support to migratory students. And then there's some examples of how to do that. The second one looks at providing support services. First of all, you want to coordinate with other agencies, programs, whatever. And then if there aren't services available, then the migrant program steps in and provides them, or you make sure that families have transportation or just eliminate barriers for families to receive support services from other agencies. And if not, the migrant program provides those. Another strategy is coordinating with LEA and or community-based school readiness programs to provide migratory children ages 3 through 5 with access to school readiness services. So these are just some sample strategies from some of the states. So also in the plan are measurable program outcomes. And these are what the objectives of the migrant program. So an example is if we provide 5 hours of reading instruction a week throughout the summer, we want students to improve their reading skills. So we should have an MPO that addresses that directly. So we're really looking at the impact of the MEP. So there are lots of steps in the process of developing an SDP. So an SDP committee is convened, and some of you on this call have participated in SDP committees in their states. The committee reviews the CNA results. They also review state performance targets. They decide on service delivery strategies and MPOs. And then they also look at ways to implement those strategies, and then also identify needed resources and supports to be able to implement the strategies, as well as designing a systematic evaluation. So the components of an SDP, these are the required components in the SDP toolkit. You must include state performance targets, needs assessment results, the strategies, the MPOs, and the evaluation plan. Other suggested components, which we always include in SDPs, are migratory children identified to receive priority for services, the IDNR plan, parent involvement plan, exchange of student records, which talks about MSIX or MIS 2000, NGS, whatever your state system is, as well as the federal system. Implementation and accountability in local programs. And then all SDPs that meta-completes have a logic model. So we look at the logic of the migrant program at the state level. So moving on to evaluation. Why do we evaluate migrant programs? We want to determine whether the program is doing what it's supposed to do and that it's impacting migratory children, and also to inform future programming. So if something's not working, we can kind of tell from the data if some sort of intervention is not supporting student achievement, then we want to change that intervention. So it helps by improving program planning. Also, it helps determine the degree to which projects are implemented as planned and identify problems that are encountered, and then identify areas in which children and youth may need different MEP services. And of course, because evaluation is required for all state MEPs, we need to look at the impact of what we're doing on our children. So evaluation is conducted in different areas. For the migrant education program, we have 2 types of evaluation that are combined into the one overall evaluation. The first part is implementation evaluation. And that looks at the level of implementation of the strategies in the service delivery plan. At what level are projects implementing the strategies? At what level are they providing reading instruction or math instruction or providing support services, those kinds of things. We also look at MEP services, how many kiddos are being served, how many PFS kiddos are being served. We look at the ways in which parents are receiving services and the way staff are being supported through the MEP. Then also, we look at the results evaluation. How are students doing? In this part, we look at state reading and math assessment results. We also look at state graduation and dropout rates. we look at the GEPRA measure results, and then progress toward the MEP MPOs. So the GEPRA measures are this data is what is reported to Congress by OME. So this data includes migratory student proficiency on ELA and math state assessments in grades 3 through 8, also grade level promotion and graduation rates for migratory students in grades 7 through 12, and then also the percentage of migratory students completing Algebra 1 by 11th grade. So these three things are really important data points for the migrant program, because when Congress looks at this, they're looking at the impact of the MEP on these three items. So examples of MPO data that's included in some of the MEP evaluations is local reading and math assessment results, regular year and or summer, and then local school readiness assessment results for preschoolers, high school credit accrual data, the number of credits received, the courses that students are participating in, as well as services data, such as the number of migratory students receiving support services, the number that are eligible, the number that are receiving instructional services. So any MEP evaluation that you look at should have some sort of data like this in case you're looking for this in your role. So ways to use this data in the CIC process for IDNR. So some of the ways you can do it is to review CSPR data included in the evaluation report. I think for some states, that's probably the easiest way to get at CSPR data is if they have the report published on the website, especially the number of eligible migratory students by grade level to determine if IDNR efforts need to be increased for certain populations. For example, like OSY. If you've got 2 or 3 OSY in your whole state, you know that IDNR efforts need to be increased to find those OSY out there. Or children birth to age 2. Sometimes there's, more efforts need to be to find those kiddos, those ages. Kiddos who aren't in school are typically obviously harder to find. Most evaluation reports also have the number of eligible migratory students in each project. You can review this data to determine if a particular area needs to focus more on IDNR. Also, if your state has a recruiter survey, which some of the states we work with do, you can review the ratings and the comments of your fellow recruiters to inform future IDNR efforts. And also you can review the recommendations made by recruiters for IDNR and for training on the survey.
It looks like we had 2 people raising their hand. You guys, if you want to, instead of raising your hand, go ahead and put your information in the chat box, your question, and we can see if we can address it when we see it.
And then other ways to use data to inform IDNRs. Data can help guide program planning efforts and should be a backbone of IDNR. IDNR data is not just farm and agribusiness information, but also what is happening with the program and all the resources mentioned in this presentation. So really, when you're looking at IDNR, you want to be looking at the big picture and to inform what you're doing in your job and your role. And then these data and information can be vital to providing key insights about the migratory populations served by recruiters. Jessica, do you have anything to add to this part?
Not exactly to this, but I do have an activity we can do here in a little bit when we want to switch over to that. Okay, perfect. So I think that was, in a nutshell, that's the continuous improvement cycle. I know we went through it real fast, and hopefully it's just kind of that umbrella information about the continuous improvement cycle. So does anybody have any questions? And Jessica, I can't see, I can see the chat. We have some questions for you because we're going to kind of make sure that this makes sense. We've given you a lot of information. So what I want to do is in the chat box, if you would tell me, okay, we are considered a supplemental program, right? Do you want to address that, Cari, as far as what that means and stuff?
Yeah, so supplemental means that, and the way we provide training on this is that it's a cupcake. So the migrant program is the cherry on top. So until you eat the cake, the icing, the sprinkles, until you exhaust all the other programs, agencies, whatever that's out there, then the migrant program can provide services. The migrant program is that cherry on top. So that's kind of how we, how we describe that supplemental versus supplant.
So I've got a question. All of you guys pretty much have, okay, impact of COVID on this. Well, you want to put your specific question as far as how supplemental is related to impact of COVID, or what exactly do you mean by that? Daniel's comment. Okay, maybe we'll wait for his question. All right, if you guys in the chat box will put down what you think, if you had to say, look, I don't know that we even need this needs assessment. I think I already know what they need. What would you say would be the burning need of your kids? But I'm going to ask you by grade, by a section of grade. So we're going to do this for several different areas, because this is kind of some of the things that in this needs assessment process, they want your feedback and you're going to see stuff in the field, but then you have to actually come up with a strategy to be able to meet it. So if you were to say that you know specific needs of pre-K, migrant pre-K kids, what would you say? Go ahead and put that in the chat box. Migrant pre-K students. Let's say you're on the needs assessment committee right now for just a random state. What is their need? Access to pre-K programs. Okay, so we've got another question. All of our services are supposed to be considered supplemental, so we can talk specifically about what that means.
Yep.
Okay, childcare, transportation, school readiness. Let's see what we got. Anything? Access to parent education, transportation, housing, at-home evidence-based curriculum, transportation, delayed milestones, school readiness, help in navigating the state application, parental involvement, school supplies. So we're seeing a lot of, all over the place.
Yep.
Cari, do you want to pick out 2 or 3 of those of that group?
Well, and so the process for the CNA then is you've got all these needs related to preschool. How do we know what are the most important needs? And so the big part of that CNA process is prioritizing the needs and then writing strategies that can address those needs so that projects have the ability to, that strategies that are broad enough that projects have the ability to, because every project's needs are different. So we want those strategies to be broad so that projects are able to individualize their services, but still implement the strategy.
So let's pick one of those or 1 or 2 of them to do exactly, because I think it'll be helpful to see. It's one thing to pick out a need. It's another thing to actually have like a strategy of how you would address it, make sure it's supplemental because we can address that. And then also those MPO, like how would we actually measure if what we're doing is right? So let's pick 1 or 2 that you think might, or if the group wants to pick 1 or 2, however you want to do that.
So school readiness. So let's say, so we've got a need for making sure that preschoolers are ready to enter kindergarten. So we know that preschoolers can be served by other programs, but then there are also migratory preschoolers that are not being served by other programs. So you can write a strategy that says, coordinate to ensure that migratory preschoolers are enrolled in preschool programs that they're eligible for. And if not, provide those children with support and in service and instruction to make sure that they have the school readiness skills to be prepared for kindergarten. So that's kind of, you always want to coordinate first. You want to make sure that the kids, to make sure that we're not supplanting, that the kids are receiving services that are already available. If, for example, it's a Head Start program or migrant seasonal Head Start program, they've already started, there's no slots, and there's no other private preschool programs that the kiddos can either afford or are eligible for, then the migrant program can do home visits. The migrant program can do a center-based preschool that they can set up if they want to set up like a regional center-based preschool or something like that. So an MPO for that would then be to, but you could say 75% of the migratory children that received MEP school readiness instruction will increase their score from pre-test to post-test. So we start with the need that the kids need to be prepared for kindergarten. Then we look at how the migrant program provides services and how the migrant program makes sure that preschoolers are connected to services that are already out there. And if not, then provide services. Then we can look at when the MEP does provide the services, to what extent do the services impact preschooler school readiness skills?
And then related to that, could you give an example of if, as they're trying to partner with other agencies and they see things, when would be like the stoplight to say, hey, that's not supplemental, this would be, because one of the questions was, how do you do transportation? Can you give us a context of transportation, when it would be allowable and when it might not be allowable, in the just looking at the idea of being supplemental?
Again, if you can get transportation, if there's a program that'll provide transportation to migrant students, then that program should be providing the transportation. If there is no other way to get that migratory child to services or to a program, then it would be the migrant programs. They can then step up and be able to provide those services.
Perfect.
Again, it's that cherry on the top.
Exactly. I think we get lost in that. Sometimes districts will say, well, we want to provide tutoring and we think it's the best to just go ahead and do it during the regular day because we already have the kids there and we already have the school. How do you navigate that? And I'm putting you on the spot just because I know that this is what you do for a living, but at the same time, I think these are questions that sometimes we don't ask. And sometimes we just assume, okay, we have funding, we're for tutoring. There are areas where it's supplemental and there's areas that it is not supplemental. So maybe an example of that.
So, it would be, you could have a migrant tutor that goes into a classroom and supports migrant students in the classroom. Or you could, have a little advisory time for migratory students to be pulled out and to go with a migrant tutor during the day. But really and truly, you can't replace what's already there. So let's say you're starting a new program. There's with district funds or whatever, it's already providing 2 staff. So you would have to be, if you're a migrant program coming in, you would have to add to those staff. You cannot replace those 2 staff. Yeah,
they can't say, oh, well, now migrant has their own translator, so we don't have to be there. And so sometimes that will happen. So you want to make sure that you're doing that. We have a comment that says we serve them in home, but parents want the students to go to school because they said that it's not the same to serve a few hours than being all day in school. So we should never take the place of school, but there might be more context to what you're saying. It may be that you used to do an in-home, you used to do an at-school summer program, and then because of COVID, you had to just do 3 or 4 hours, and parents say, hey, we don't like that. That's an example of parents, participation in there. Of you might have surveys that you're designing your program, but then COVID may have completely just messed it up. And so, that's an example of parents saying, hey, we need something different.
Yep. And then in some states, they've got like state-funded summer programs, but typically they don't go all day. So what some states do is, like, in the morning, it'll be the state-funded program where the migrant kids are going into the state-funded program for summer programming. Well, then in the afternoon, the migrant program takes over and they do all kinds of project-based learning, STEM activities, nutrition, working with a cooperative extension program, teaching kids about nutrition, where you can do those things that look different than the regular school year, but they're still learning the content areas. So it's above and beyond what's already being provided.
Perfect. Says, how do we know the grant money is being used for migrant families? And that we would really need to know the context of where you're coming from. If you're a recruiter and you're just wondering how program money is being used, and that would be something you talk with your supervisor, those above you. If you have multiple programs coming together, somebody is responsible really to make sure that migrant money is going to migrant kids, and it's an addition. So it's not that you can just throw it all. So, here, we'll just add to it. There has to be a strategic plan on how that money is going to be used.
Absolutely. I mean, it has to be very transparent of where the money is going and who the money is going to.
So there are some school districts who provide tutoring to the student body as a whole, and migrant students have to be part of the student body, and therefore management at the project school use migrant funds for other purposes. That's a good example. If that need is already being met by the school district, it wouldn't make sense to run some simultaneous program to pull them out. It could be an addition, but it couldn't. That's a perfect example of that need is met. Now, what else could you do in addition?
Yeah, or if you've got a school that's on a 4-day school week, You could bring kiddos in for a few hours on Fridays, do some enrichment, do some academic tutoring, that kind of thing. It's basically when you just have to remember that if there's something already in place, that program, and the kiddos are eligible for that program, then that program takes precedence over spending migrant funds for that.
Well, we had an example when I was working in Tennessee. We were super underfunded, and we really wanted to find how we could best serve our migrant kids. And we didn't have enough money to get them into, all these different programs, but we decided we could teach our parents. And so after working with our needs assessment group, one of our strategies was we are going to train parents on how to prepare their kids to get them ready for school. So we're going to talk about numbers, shape, colors. We're going to teach them how to do these things in home so they can play with their kids, be conscious of those things that they need to learn. And so our strategy was, can we teach our parents and get them all, and instead of getting, we tried different Head Starts, we tried all these different ways and we couldn't get them in. So that wound up being a strategy. So coming from that, if we have to then evaluate, give me some examples of, we just mentioned, we want to make sure that pre-K is getting, closer for readiness. How do you evaluate something like that? So let's say I tell you that I'm going to do this parent program, and we're going to make sure that they know their colors, numbers, shapes, ABCs. We're going to do so many visits, give them games and things. And we think this is a grand idea. What are you going to tell me as an evaluator of what I should also be thinking of or gathering to be able to prove that what my strategy, that if it's even effective?
So typically when we look at parent outcomes, it's survey results. But you can ask them themselves, to what extent did this support help you learn strategies for supporting your preschooler by learning numbers and colors and how to work with them at home for school readiness skills. But you can also do, one state that we work with, they do they ask parents how often do you read to your child, and what types of activities do you provide with your child? But it really is a self-report from parents. Yeah. You could have, the people who are doing the home visits to do an observational form as well. That could be something that you look at pre and then post, kind of do an observation.
Exactly. So it looks like from Jesus's question, maybe we weren't understanding what he says, because he says that shouldn't the funds be used for other migrant services instead of non-migrant services? So we don't want to get totally into our understanding is if the students were being served through a school system and migrant decided to use the money, not put migrant funds into that and use it for another purpose, that would be perfectly fine. A case that would not be perfectly fine would be, we use migrant funds to tutor all kids, whether they are migrant or not. So I just want to make sure that we're being clear on that. Can migrant funds be used to help a former migrant student?
That's a toughie. It depends on if they're still within that period of time that you can still serve them. But I think if they've been out of the program for a year or two, no, I don't think so. I don't think that's allowable.
You do have continuation of services only for credit accrual, but that's, okay, so let's look at a different age group. Let's look at high school students. And then how you mentioned the benchmarks. If you want to go back to your slide as far as talking about what these benchmarks that they're really asking us for, like the GEPRA.
The GEPRAs, yep.
Yeah. So let's say that what would you guys say in the chat box would be some needs of your high school students? If you had to just pick things that you definitely think would be needs of them. Because we're going from one end to the other. We've got pre-K to high school. College readiness. What else? Credit recovery.
Yep.
Lack of knowledge of what is available after high school. Technology, individuals tutoring. Right now, counseling, trauma, credit recovery. For years in Tennessee, we did a leadership institute with high school kids. And one of the things that we really noticed is that a lot of times they are not talked to about their future until 11th or 12th grade when it's really late.
Yep.
And so yes, we should have those conversations, but we found a really ideal age to start talking about college readiness was 8th grade, was 9th grade, when they still didn't have any idea of what they wanted to do. And then you start talking about, hey, you need to make sure you have your algebra by this time. You need to make sure you have this. So we found that it was huge. And we would say, hey, do you know what this career makes for money? Or do you know what they need to study? And they really generally do not have an idea. So let's look at some of your comments here. I'm talking too much. Tutoring, FAFSA, summer school, gap in math and reading, counseling, individual counseling, graduation on time, improving math ELA, motivation to stay in school, agreed starting early. And we have a question, do migrant students have access to college and career courses in a timely manner? So this could be a question that you're asking and looking at your program decisions there, motivating them. Let's take a look at this one that's kind of a little bit harder. It's a little bit abstract. Let's say you think your high school students are not, they don't have the motivation and you want to develop something to help motivate them. All right, that's a kind of abstract idea. What are you going to do? Let's say Cari's in the meeting with us. We all agree that our high school students for some reason lack motivation. What does that mean? What could we do with that? What does that have to give us some strategies specifically about that? Because that's something that comes up a bunch. Lack motivation, but it may be completely different factors. So what do we think specifically? Let's look at that idea of our high school students. We believe that they need more motivation. Where do we go with that? What would be a strategy to address that? What would we do? What do you think? Because you hear that a lot. Preparedness for the ACT, need staff willing to fight in their corner.
Yep.
Well said. Meet with students more often. Bring motivational speakers that can encourage them. These are really good ideas. Keep going.
I love it because, we think about the negative, but really these are all thinking about the positive. What can we do to improve services and connect with students to increase engagement? And I think that's what's key with the migrant program.
Yeah, these are all financial awareness, field trips, post-secondary exploration. Listen to what they have to say. Take them to a college fair, college visitations. Bring speakers. I can say from my own side, I've got 3 kids. My kids are not migrant students, but I have taken them to many leadership programs that we did and they are laser focused now. They may change, and I may be saying something different in 2 years. Laser focused on what they want to do. And I really feel that it's because of this exposure that they've had summer after summer of, hey, what do you want to do? This is what, and so I think that that really does make a difference. Bring speakers who've been successful, goal setting, self-efficacy. So what could be an MPO, or what would be, the formal language of some of these ideas that you have right here? What do we think? Let's take a chance at actually typing up maybe a possible MPO in the box, and then we'll have Cari let us know what she thinks as far as whether that would be something that we could do. So what would be an MPO? A measurable program out, something that or a strategy that you think. Introduce them to skilled labor jobs. 75% of enrolled high school students will have a post-secondary plan. Very good.
That's awesome.
What else? That may be the only one. What else do you think?
So some ways that states have really targeted this specific issue, dropouts, motivation, student engagement, is they have migrant student type advocates, and this is Washington I'm referring to in some other states, and migrant graduation support staff. And that's specifically what they do, is basically provide that mentorship, that advising for secondary level students, to make sure that we all know that connection, that if students have that connection with somebody in the school, that adult, it makes it that much more, it's so important to have that connection. You guys are coming up with some great ideas.
Some good ones. So 75% of high school students will have a certain ACT score. And that's a great point for them to even be able to take that earlier, and maybe you can help them with that. 75% will attend college tours. That is a really good idea. How many have joined extracurricular activities to enhance chances for success? Washington has summer academies, academies, thank you, provided for PFS students. Bring in professionals to speak to them if possible from their countries. Great ideas, very good ideas. And then you have this. So as far as the GEPRA data and related to where are states getting, like if, for example, I feel like the percentage of kids, you know, high school this with algebra would be something that should really be on all of our radars. Like if we're working with high school kids, what suggestions do you have for how they can, if I'm a recruiter, how can I get that information? Or is it, you know, I feel like this is kind of something that's absolutely essential for our migrant program. This is what Congress is really looking on how we're doing. Suggestions on how a recruiter might be able to, from you guys think, and this can be Cari or anybody, how could you find out if they've taken algebra by 11th grade? This may be obvious and then it may not be obvious. And how many of you think you know this about the kids that you work with? Do you have a good idea? Do you think that most of them have their transcript?
Yep.
MSIX.
MSIX.
Counselor should know. MSIX, so speak to counselors. So you can see you may be recruiters, but you still have that direct connection with families. And that can be an indicator that you're just aware of to see, hey, have you taken algebra yet? Well, no. Well, then that's something we really want to make sure. For college readiness, they have to have taken at least Algebra 1 with a lot of other things they're supposed to take.
Yep, and it has implications for providing services and making sure that the migrant programs are supporting those kiddos who are in algebra and also with pre-algebra skills, even, you know, before they get to the high school level, making sure that the migrant program is supporting those math skills.
We have a question out of the Q&A, which I think will probably be best answered by the next session about MSIX. It says, is there an easier way, unless anybody knows the answer to this, is there an easier way to download the reports offered by MSIX for new enrollments where you wouldn't have to choose each state individually to see if you have any families that have returned to your county or state? If anybody has an answer for that, I would suggest to specifically ask the next session, ask them directly, because they should have an answer for you right there, unless anybody else has an answer to that. Okay. All right, so let's do one more of these and let's look at middle school. No, let's look at K through 5. Wait, here we go. Several middle schools have a dream to become professional athletes, but they and their families do not know about college eligibility and the importance of college drafts to become pro. And if you want to ask anybody, Alejandro would be a good person to reach out about that.
Ray, I love your comment. Oh, I love it. Yep, true. So, and you know, there's programs out there like Gear Up. And so if you've got a Gear Up in your area or know of a program that all migrant kids are eligible for Gear Up because it's a cohort model. So they serve a whole grade level of kids regardless of, you know, it's the whole grade level. And Gear Up is directed at following kids from 6th and 7th grade all the way through either 12th grade or their first year of college. And so that's what they're for. They have advisors, they're supporting them, making sure that they're prepared for post-secondary education or careers. And so, I mean, that's a great program that if you've got one in your area to connect with and make sure that they're providing those services to your migratory students.
Yeah, perfect example. Well, let's look specifically at out-of-school youth, because this is another area that, you know, it's a little bit harder to kind of figure out and quantify exactly what they need. What would you say would be the need in the box, if you want to use the chat box, of direct needs of OSY, again, related to things, if you were to look at it and make strategies that we could actually kind of address. Now, one of the comments is really good. Some programs do require citizenship, so it is very important to make sure that you know. Yeah, good point.
I know that's not the case for Gear Up, but I don't know about the other ones. So. Okay.
So we've got English support, English survival, obtaining their GED. We have Juan Medina as the answer. I'm not sure. ESL and interpretive services. What else? What other needs? ESL for young adults, obtaining the GED, continued academic support, life skills. Give me some examples of what you mean by life skills, because we use that phrase a lot. What would you say would be some life skills? ESL for job safety.
Yep.
ISOC life skills, opening a bank account, getting a job, using money conversion, ESL farm safety, shopping, learning how to navigate the United States. 75 identified OSYs will come. He's jumping ahead of us. I need help. All right, we need to have Alejandro's going to lead this. Perfect. So give me some MPOs for what you just said was important. So you may have said health, you may have said understanding the US. Now your challenge is to answer your own comment with an MPO. In our area, they require photo ID. So maybe working with your consulate to see if you can do like matriculas or something like that might help depending on what country they're coming from. Explain resources. All right, your challenge now, our challenge to you is, what is a strategy if you were to have to, if you're sitting in one of the sessions, I'm trying to figure out needs, and now you've moved to, you found the need, you've just mentioned the need, give me an actual measurable program outcome, a statement that's kind of showing what you could, or a strategy, what you could do with that. Let's see. We know Alejandro's got it.
Yeah.
Let's see, where are we at? Kind of think about it and share that. Give me my...
Alejandro's used to us giving door prizes.
75% of all OSY who attend life skill training will receive life skills training by the end of the program. End of your survey as to which services they will access. Okay, so maybe you're looking at, you know, which one they want to choose. Are you getting like feedback from them, or end of your survey of kind of what they did? 100% of all OSY that attend a GED class will obtain it. Good luck with that. That's a very, well, let's address that. How do you gauge the percentage? Like if I told you 100% of the kids that go to GED classes will, 100% of them will get there. What would you say as an evaluator, as a, you know, guiding a program? What would you tell them?
I would say we never do 100%, because there's always, we just had this conversation, I think yesterday with the group, there's always things that are out of your control. So you don't want to set an objective at 100%. So, you know, something realistic, 90%, 80% are both very realistic, and you've got the majority of the kids who are participating. So that would be my advice with the 100% part.
Probably
in your strategy, the implementation piece, you can put all. Say, we want all OSY to receive life skills lessons. So that is, then that's not measurable. That's just something you're wanting your projects to provide, that service. But then when you look at the MPO, you want to make sure it's realistic, because you don't have control of what's out there and the participation rates and things like that.
So here's one that says 90% or more of the participants who complete the program will demonstrate at least a 5% increase from pre to post assessment. That
looks like one of our MPOs. Nice job.
There was some more. It says OSY will have completed a resume and used it to apply at workforce solutions. Okay. And so that one, you know, we've got comments. I mentioned consulates. They say consulates are far away from their areas and they charge well over $300 for transportation. So of course, if you needed the ID, you can come up with a different option, but that's just one. 75% of OSY participate in 3 of 4 life skills lessons. So you're kind of deciding short sessions, also providing a teacher for them to learn basics. So a strategy could be that you're going to provide this, the teacher, and then you're going to measure how he or she does based on these MPOs that you decide there.
Yep. And then the thing is, one of the things to remember is we do not have to have an MPO for every strategy. You can have 2 or 3 strategies and 1 MPO, because what you want the MPOs to be is focused on the outcome. So, so you really want to look at the impact on students, on parents, on staff, the impact. To what extent did these services impact their knowledge and skills? And so there are times when we do definitely have MPOs for, let's say, we want 85% of the kiddos to have received support, MEP support services. And really, this is to get people to really think about, okay, we've got these kids, we're only providing 30% of them with support services. We need to get more kids served with support services because they need these support services. So sometimes those more process type MPOs are really important too.
What would you say, having worked with different states and in this process, how valuable is the input of recruiters? Because I think sometimes they may not see just how helpful that can be. What kind of things are, I mean, in your thoughts, how valuable is that feedback? Is that information from them?
It's very valuable. And in most of the states that we work with, they include recruiters on the CNA and SDP teams. And that's because they have the most direct contact with families and students. And so they are, especially in the needs assessment part, they can definitely provide that observational assessment of needs for students that maybe somebody at the state level or regional level cannot provide.
Yeah, so, and I think that's really key to see that you're getting, you have that contact, but we also wanted, part of the purpose of this presentation was to encourage you to learn what your state's service delivery plan is, learn what your needs that have been identified, and just so that you're aware of this process. And when the evaluation comes out, check out and see how things are doing, because sometimes there's direct things that they may say, well, we really feel like our migrant parents are still not as informed as they could be about this area or this area. That's something that you could help with as you're reaching out to families, and you have that in your mind, and that's a specific need. Or like working with, the OSI consortium over the years, and when we were members of the consortium from Tennessee, and they would have us fill out this survey, which they still do. And we realized that the time that we were offering classes was absolutely not at the best time once we surveyed, and that it would really vary from every single place. So getting that really good data helped us say, wow, most of our guys have really, only been to 3rd, 4th grade. We need to change the way that we're teaching. We need to change the way that we're thinking. But you guys are very kind of the heart of the program, that you can also, learn of these things, be aware of it. CSPR may look like, just a million numbers, but when you know what you're looking for, it really can be a really good guide for you.
Yep. And again, in the evaluation report, the way we present the CSPR data in the evaluation reports, it's a little bit easier to it's all in one little place, where typically the CSPR's got a bunch of different tables, and we kind of combine it all and show percentages and things like that. So evaluation reports are really the easiest place to get to and review that CSPR data. They used to post it, and I think they still do, but I think they've moved it, and I've got to find them. Typically, we get the CSPR reports from the states that we work with. So, but they used to post them all on ed.gov.
Yeah.
So, okay, great.
As part of the continuous improvement model is to share the needs and solutions with parents. Yep. Having the recruiters aware of the solutions makes it easier to communicate these with parents. Exactly.
Absolutely. Plus, the recruiters can also sell the program. They can say, here's what the program provides. Here's what our goals are. Here's what our the needs that we've found. Here's how we're going to be providing services. So to be able to know and have great knowledge of the continuous improvement, those components and what's in there, is really important for recruiters.
Yeah. So I feel like the more that you're informed, and I know for me, when I was, suddenly now responsible to do the CSPR, it made a lot more sense of, okay, well, does it matter if it's a certified teacher or non-certified, or we need to improve this area? And it just really made a lot more sense. So we feel like it says here, recruiters are really the face of the program. Yep. And you are the advocates there. It says, knowing what the program is going to offer makes it easier for recruiters to obtain parent signatures, and also knowing the direction that you're going. Maybe there's a summer program that's always been done a certain way, and all of a sudden it's done different, and the recruiter can give the background. Well, we're seeing that we really need to focus more on this area or this area. And rather than like, I'm not sure, and you've got that parent saying, well, I don't like this new, you can kind of be the buffer and explain the difference and why that's happening. So what other questions do you have? We have just a little bit of time left. Maybe, did I cut you off through the slides? Do we have any more slides that we didn't go through? I think we went all the way.
Just this one. Show me the data.
There's a lot of Mpo Data, do we have other questions on, we're hoping that this made sense as far as how the puzzles go together. Are there any questions that you have for us before we finish today that are related to any of it, related to needs assessment, CSPR, MSIX, any of those things that before we finish, kind of thoughts people have? Watch the box. Okay, one final little group. Let's say that would staff professional development ever be part of a plan that, you know, like you take a look at needs assessment or CSPR and all of that. Is there a component that goes into kind of how do programs address that?
Oh, absolutely. And so sometimes states will embed PD throughout their goal areas. And the goal areas of a migrant program are reading, math, graduation, services to OSY, and school readiness. But then some states add another goal area for non-instructional support services. And typically the parent engagement and the professional development piece is in that. But then some states want to keep that embedded. So they will have strategies and MPOs for professional development throughout those goal areas. So it's always embedded in every service delivery plan, because you have to be able to support staff. And then one thing that's been coming kind of clear, besides staff being able to have the skills to serve migratory students and families, it's also that kind of that Migrant 101 training. And so that services are provided that are culturally relevant and equitable. So that is something that's really coming through in the most recent CNAs and SDPs that we've been working on. It is equity, cultural relevance, and you know, also the impact of COVID and on mental health and health services is all kind of, it's much more in the forefront than it used to be.
Yeah, Ray had a good comment. When the need identified by the CNA is something the staff is not equipped to provide or only partially able to provide training to staff when we need it. It's perfect example. Okay, well, if we still, I think we're pretty much ready to wrap up. If you have any other questions, here is our information. Feel free to reach out to us. We hope that this kind of, you know, put the pieces a little bit. I know for, like I said, Cari is a wonderful resource. Lots of times I'll ask her on our things that we're doing. Like, for example, and as a reminder, we're going to send out an evaluation on the, later today, I'll send an email to everyone on the Institute. We would love we're always trying to make sure that we're improving. So we'd love your feedback and really appreciate each one of you guys giving us your time this morning. So thank you very much.
Thank you all so much.
Okay, I'm going to stop recording.